Hey friends, how's it going? Welcome to Live at 5. I'm super pumped to be with you today as we get rolling, get started. If you're just joining us right now, go ahead and share it. Share this on your Facebook post. Share this with, if you're watching YouTube, send a friend a text message. Let them know that it is time for Live at 5. Glad to have you with us today. As you know, we've been talking, I carry on Live at 5s. If you're just joining us, I should say not as you know, but if you're just joining us, what I typically do is just want to give you something during the middle of the week, just to kind of motivate you, challenge you. Ultimately, my goal with Live at 5 is this, to challenge you in your faith with Jesus Christ, to press you deeper into a relationship of meaning and purpose and fulfillment with your Creator, God, and your Savior, Jesus Christ. And so today, I want to continue the subject that we had this weekend at Journey Church's online service. Now, if you weren't able to watch, I definitely encourage you to check it out. It's on our Facebook and YouTube page as well. It's a series that we've got going called The Sermon You Need to Hear. And ultimately, what these sermons you need to hear are all about are really what God has been speaking to us, either for us that we want to share with you, or what God has been speaking to us as leaders or pastors for you to help encourage you in this season or in your relationship with Jesus Christ. And the last couple of weeks, I have really just been walking through some things, actually really months. I've been walking through some of the messages that I preached, and the one that I preached this weekend about rest in Jesus Christ is really something that if there is anything that I have been learning or God has been forcing me to recognize, it is learning to find rest in Jesus Christ. That's the idea of rejuvenation, of rebuilding, of finding soul rest, not just day off or vacation rest, but like to be okay with what's going on in the world around me because I am at peace with what God is doing in my life. And so that's what it was all about. So if you haven't watched it, I would really, really, really encourage you to watch it. As you're tuning in, drop me a note, say hi if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook. I got the comments here. I'm looking at you guys. I want to say hi. Let me know. Don't forget, share this right now. Share this with a friend. Let's dive into it. I got something I want to challenge you with today. I see some friends. I'm going to shout them out. I see Tamiko. Good afternoon, Tamiko. Madeline, Sherry, Derek, Elisha. Good to see you, my friend. Melinda De Roche. Good to have you. Lisa. All right, guys. So glad that you've tuned in with us today. And as we continue the subject or this idea of rest, here's something I want to talk about. Paul the Apostle, I finished this on Sunday, and so even if you didn't hear the message and you don't go back and listen to it, I understand. Paul the Apostle talks about this in 2 Corinthians. Literally, the whole letter of 2 Corinthians is about how tough Paul's life is. The context behind it is that the church in which he planted is almost in essence rejected Paul and said like, well, what gives you the qualifications to come and speak into our lives? And this is what Paul writes in this book that we call 2 Corinthians, is all of these qualifications. Most of them have to do with suffering. So Paul talks about that in chapter 1. He talks about it in chapter 4. He talks about it in chapter 12. He talks about it all throughout the thread of the book. But I ended on Sunday the message of Paul the Apostle talking about being perplexed but not in despair, about being hard-pressed but not crushed, about being persecuted but not abandoned. And Paul says, all of these things I do them for your glory, so that you would know Jesus Christ. And then Paul says these amazing words. Paul says these words. He says, even though the outer man is withering away, is fading away, he says, the inner man, my soul, is being renewed day by day. And that is the concept that I want to talk to you about of rest. Rest in Jesus. Because Jesus tells us in Matthew 11, he says, come to me, all you who are weary, who are heavy laden, and you will find rest. He says, take my yoke upon you, for my yoke is easy, and my burden is light, and you will find rest for your souls. And so as we dive in today on the subject of rest, I want to ask you this question. Post it in the comments if you're watching online. If you're watching later on, post this in the comment while we're talking. I want to know, what would be your optimal day off? What is it? Like, if you could have anything to do on a day where you're not going to do anything, what would it be? I know maybe it's curl up with a blanket and a book. Maybe it's binge on a Netflix show. Maybe it's go spend a day in the mountains. Right now, wherever you're at, on YouTube, on Facebook, comment. Let me know, what is your optimal day off gonna look like? If you could have anything to do anywhere in the world, what would your optimal day off look like? So I want to see those comments come in. Let's see who's got the best day off. As you're writing those comments, or as you're thinking about what your optimal day off is, I want to just take you really quickly to something today that I want to focus on, what I talked about with the subject of rest. And I've got my Bible here. I'm turning on a page, and I'm kind of just going impromptu. Today was one of those days. You know what I mean? One of those days, like jam-packed, like one thing to the next kind of days. So as you're doing that, let me know what your best day off, your optimal day off would be. As you're doing that, I want to just go back to the verse that I read about Jesus telling us to come to him. Jesus says these words. He says, "Come to me," verse 28 of Matthew 11, "all who labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest." He says, "Take my yoke upon you." And this is what I want to focus on. "And learn from me." Learn from me. Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." This is what I want to point out, that Jesus gives us the model of rest. If there was anybody on earth that could picture what true rest, what true peace is all about, it's Jesus Christ. Jesus was able to rest at the back of a boat in the middle of a storm. Jesus was able to navigate tense situations. Jesus was able, even in the moment before he was about to go to his death, to find peace with God and embrace the cross that he was about to go to. Jesus was the ultimate example of rest and of peace. And Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." One thing I want to point out today is this, and this is what my challenge is going to be. I remember I was having lunch with somebody once, and we were talking about our faith, and we were talking about what God has done for us in this day and in our lives. And in this subject about Jesus, and the subject about church, and the subject about what God is doing, this person leaned over to me, and he kind of leaned in real intently, and he says, "You know, Pastor, I want to tell you something." And I said, "Okay, what is it?" And he says, "Did you know that Jesus was a Christian?" And he kind of leaned back like, "Oh man, I'm going to drop some bombs on you right now of truth. Did you know that Jesus was a Christian?" Now, I've been talking about this all week with people in my conversations. It really didn't dawn on me until after the conversation what he was saying is that Jesus was a Christian like you and I, like was a follower. But that's actually not true at all, because if we want to be accurate with what Jesus was a Jew. And if there's anything we know, Jesus was an observant Jew. In other words, Jesus lived, operated, and died a Jew. And if there's one thing I have learned from my Jewish friends, it is the concept that I personally and most of us in America are really bad at. It's the concept of Sabbath. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say Sabbath? Like what that means? Sabbath. Now, a lot of times we think Sabbath just means Saturday. But Sabbath is something totally different. And what I want to lean in today in the next just few minutes, I won't take very much of your time today, but I'm going to challenge you with something today. So stick with me on this, is Jesus says to learn from me. Now, I'm going to just do this really quickly on my phone. Jesus was about 33 years old when he died. Jesus would have spent 52 weeks a year. That's 1,000, my focus isn't doing it today. 1,716 Sabbaths. That there would have been 1,716 Friday night to Saturday evenings that Jesus, as a Jewish person, would have observed what rest is. Countless occasions throughout Scripture, we see that Jesus would continually withdraw from the crowds, withdraw from the people, and go out into the wilderness or go somewhere where people wouldn't. Why? Because Jesus oftentimes sought out rest. And when we look at the concept of rest and we look at the basis of our culture, we have a culture that desires, that literally worships desire. In other words, desire has become our God. If we work hard enough, we'll achieve what we desire. If we grind it out enough, we'll get our desires. And if you get in the way of my desires, then you are hindering me from achieving what is my God-given right. And when I say God-given right, I say that because One of the most misleading statements I think we have in our nation was written in our Declaration of Independence. It says that it is the inalienable right of men for the pursuit of happiness. So we look at happiness as desire. In other words, do everything you can to pursue the things that you desire, and your life will be good. But our culture has proven that is not the way, because some of your amazing days, like so Tamiko's is a day in a small village. That sounds like straight out of a movie, Tamiko. Sherry says totally disconnected from electronics. Lisa says I love spending time with my grandkids. I saw watching Kung Fu movies. That looks like a good one. Some Netflix binging, floating the Deschutes River with friends. That's a great day off. But here is what Jesus says. He says, learn from me. If there's one thing Jesus knew, is that Jesus was intentional about withdrawal. Now, I'm not saying withdrawal or disconnection from everything around you, but Jesus was intentional. I don't think I have it up anymore, 1,716 Sabbaths Jesus would have gone through as a Jewish observer, as a Jewish man. That's 1,716 Friday night to Saturday evenings where he completely withdrew from everything else and had dinner, had breakfast, spent time in relationships, spent time in study, spent time in prayer. And Jesus says to us, learn from me. Now, I find it interesting. Now, if you know the Ten Commandments, and I'm going to just take you to them real quick in Exodus chapter 20, there are 10 Commandments, you know, those tablets of stone that Charlton Heston, as Moses played in the 10 Commandments, he walks down, and we know them because they're all thou shalt nots, like thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not commit adultery, or thou shalt not covet, and all these different things. Like, great ways to live life. I mean, truly, the 10 Commandments, beyond being law, if humanity would just abide by these 10 simple concepts, imagine how well our world would be if we didn't steal from each other, if we didn't covet from each other, if we didn't commit adultery or cheat on each other, if we didn't murder each other, if we honored our parents, and if we did these things. Imagine how great our world would be. But what's interesting in all of the 10 Commandments that God commands his people to do, there is only one of the 10 Commandments that God instructs that actually comes with a why I want you to do this. Think about this for a moment. In the 10 Commandments, God says, do not murder. But he doesn't say why. He doesn't say because it's bad. In the 10 Commandments, God says, children, respect your parents. But he doesn't say why. In the 10 Commandments, it says, do not commit adultery. But he doesn't say why, because it's kind of self-evident. It's self-serving. Like, not killing people is good. Don't cheat on your husband or your wife, good to do. Now, but with that, there's one that comes with a why. Let me read it to you really quickly. Bear with me. All right, here we go. It says this one, and it's the commandment. It's Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. I'm just going to read it. It says, remember, this is the commandment now. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Okay, that's the commandment. There it is. Observe the Sabbath. Now, here's the why. 6 days you will labor and do all of your work. On the seventh, you rest. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you will not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your livestock, or the sojourner or the traveler who is in the gates of your dwelling. And here's the why. Now, you ready for this? Look at. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is within it, and he rested on the seventh. Therefore, there it is, the Lord blessed the Sabbath and made it holy. Now, holy doesn't mean what oftentimes we think it means, like sacred. Holy means set apart, different. It means it is not the same as everything else. And so here in this command that God gives to his people, that Jesus has learned from me, and what I'm driving at is Jesus lived this by modeling it every week. He took one day and set it aside as a Sabbath, and he honored it. Now, he didn't honor it in the way that the traditional Jewish religion would, because they often challenged him, because he healed people. And they said, you couldn't do that. And his disciples picked the heads of grain to eat. And they said, you couldn't do that. And he had dinner with people that he shouldn't have. And they said, you couldn't do that. And Jesus even says these words to the religious leaders. He says, listen, the Sabbath was not made for man, or man was not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man. In other words, man was not made to observe this Sabbath, or this rest was made for you, for your benefit. In other words, God knew so far in advance that you and I would need a day to rejuvenate, to recharge, to withdraw, to reconnect with ourselves, with our soul, with our lives, that he literally put it into commandment. And even though today you and I are no longer under the Mosaic law or the Old Testament system of law, Jesus says, learn from me. In other words, Jesus modeled this. If it was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for you. If God in his own sovereignty decided after 6 days of laboring to create everything we know today, but on the seventh day decided to sit back and rest and observe that it was good to do, then where do we get off thinking that we are better than God by not intentionally taking a time to withdraw, to rest, to rejuvenate our soul in our relationship with God? Are you catching this? So here's my practical application for you today. Here's just what I want to challenge you with, because here's what a Sabbath is not. I asked you what your best day would be. So float the Deschutes, day off, Switzerland Village, something like that. Great. A Sabbath is not your day off. I want you to get this. Eugene Peterson, the writer of the Message Paraphrase, says it like this, and forgive me if you've got children. It's not a bad word, but it's a bad way. Is that he says these words? He says that the idea of a day off is the bastard child of a Sabbath. In other words, we like to equate today, in our day and age, that as long as I take a day off, I'm taking a Sabbath. Not so. Because chances are, you're still using your phone, you're still checking your emails, you're still responding to text messages, you're still dealing with the stresses of the day. Are you connecting with anybody relationally? Are you taking time to look at somebody in the eyes? Are you taking a moment to read and to pray and to dive into the scriptures of God? What are you doing to find rest? Because ultimately, what I caught back from this message, from the feedback I heard so many people say on Sunday, I needed to hear this. I needed to hear that true rest comes from Jesus, and that's where rest comes from. But I want to challenge you today. Here's my challenge, very practical. To find 24 hours this week, whether it's the true Sabbath, which is the sunset on Friday to the sunset on Saturday, or Sunday all day, or a day like Christians took the Sabbath on Saturday and shifted it to the first day of the week. It could be Tuesday. It could be Thursday. But will you take 24 hours this week, and take a Sabbath rest? Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? A Sabbath rest. It means set it apart as a holy day. It means a day that is set apart from everything else. It's a day that doesn't look like any other day. It's not a day that you grind so hard that you go out and you do activities as hard as you can. It's not the day that you spend as much as you're exhausted at the end of the day because you hiked 15 miles and now you got to go take a day off to rest from your hike. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a 24-hour period that you would choose to maybe turn off your phone or not answer your emails for the day. It's a 24-hour period where maybe you're not going to watch the average 5 hours of TV that the American watches in a day. It's a 24-hour period in which you're going to connect with somebody or have a lunch with them and just talk about life. It's a 24-hour period where you're just going to pause. You can get to it tomorrow. You can answer that text or that email or that phone call or whatever it is after sunset or whatever that day is, and just pause. Feel what it feels like to be bored. You see, in America, we don't even know boredom. I was at a doctor's office today with my son waiting to meet the doctor. You remember back in the day before phones? You go to a doctor's office, they had magazines there on the countertop or on the little coffee table. You remember that, if you're old enough to remember that? And you would read a magazine, and it would often be a magazine you had nothing to do with, like Women's Health, and I'm a man, or like Outdoor Magazine, or like Car and Driver or whatever. And you would be bored to just sit around and absorb, to be present in the moment. Would you take 24 hours, maybe if you're married, with your spouse or with your family, with your kids, and lead them in a season just this week? Just try it. Just try it. Like Jesus says, learn from me, to take a period of a day and make it holy, which means set it apart from everything else. Don't do what you normally do. Don't grind the way you normally grind, because it was good enough for God to rest. It was good enough for Jesus to rest. And it's good enough for you and I to model this as well. We go so constant. We are so connected in our day and age that I don't think we know anymore what it means to rest. So my challenge to you, friends, is let's try to Sabbath together. Let's not make it a religion. Let's not make it something that's a big deal, that if somebody violates it, like the old school testament, that we're going to throw rocks at them until they die. No, that's not where we're going with this. Simply put, like Jesus did, and like God commanded his people in Exodus, to set this day aside, because God created in 6 days, and he took a day off to rest. That Jesus did it 1,700 times in his days, and it was good enough for them. So let's not try to play God and keep going 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Let's take a day and rest. And if you do, I want to know how it is. Maybe next week at Live at 5, let me know. Tell me what your rest day was. I'll make that a question. But would you take a day and just disconnect from your day-to-day and make that a holy day, a day dedicated towards getting to know your God? Pray, listen to some music, relax, go on a walk, enjoy the moment, whatever it might be. But just tune into what God wants to do. Because I think what ends up happening is we are so busy and we're so inundated with noise and distraction that we can't hear God. I love what A.W. Tozer said. God is speaking, but are we listening? So that's my challenge to you. I'm going to try it this week. I'm preaching to myself just as much as I'm challenging you. I'm going to be doing this myself this week as well. A 24-hour period to disconnect and to withdraw. Would you join me with it? Let's try it. Let's see what rest really looks like. We'll come back next week for Live at 5 and see how that rest went. That's my challenge to you today. Take one day this week and make it holy to God. Would you do that? I think when you do, and when I do, we'll find peace and rest in Jesus Christ. Friends, thanks so much for joining me today for Live at 5. I really hope this challenges you. Oh, I hope it rubs you a little bit wrong. And the reason why is because that means that it's driving us a little bit deeper into our faith in Jesus Christ. Because as I look at my week, I think, how on earth am I going to find 24 hours to do this? And that's the point. Hey guys, we'll see you next time at Live at 5. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you find rest in Jesus Christ this week.